All right, so as I said, we're going to finish chapter 14 and then start on the personal auto policy. So let me get to where I need to be. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is and I know we sort of jumped all over the place in this chapter when we last met, but one of the things I wanted to really talk about was the it's on that page. Let's go back to page. There is a certification process for people who are in the financial planning arena, and the big one that's out there is the CFP, the Certified Financial Planner. There's also the Chartered Financial Consultant and the Personal Financial Specialist. But the one that you're going to see most often is the Certified Financial Planner. That's the CFP. I don't have any idea what you need to do to get those various qualifications. I assume you need to take some courses and take some tests as they are given by the various organizations that sponsor those certifications. CFP professional designation earned by individuals who demonstrate their expertise in financial planning by passing a series of examinations administered by the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards. So there you go. That's the group that creates the certification and then tests you to make sure that you know the stuff they want you to know in order to be considered that. I also wanted to talk back about life insurance, one of the things that we use in the planning process. And we talked about the needs or the uses of insurance, life insurance, a lot. First thing I wanted to talk about, because I think this is kind of an important category, the needs-based purchase of life insurance. In the book, it's on page 211, and we have a few of them that are listed here. A burial fund. This is something that you need to be able to pay. You are responsible to pay for your funeral. If you can't pay for it, then your family will have to pay for it. An educational fund. This is needs-based. If you die and you want to make sure that your kids have the ability to go to college and have it paid for, this would be another needs-based type of insurance. An income fund is another one for if you die, you're replacing the income. A debt retirement fund, if you die deep in debt, that's going to be a problem that will carry on in your family long after you die. So debt retirement, basically you take a look at, a lot of people will have at least the amount that they have on their mortgage for their house in life insurance so that they can, if they die, then the house will be paid off, and then their surviving spouse and children don't have to worry about paying off that debt. The house will be paid for. An estate preservation fund. This is another needs-based type of insurance. When you die, there are all kinds of costs. Cost of settling an estate, burial costs, court costs, attorney's fees, federal transfer taxes, and state death taxes. They reduce your estate, and therefore what you are able to pass on to your heirs goes down. Okay. We talked about the needs for insurance at various times in your life, the early adult years, the middle adult years, and then the late adult years. I wanted to talk about the middle years right now, because the needs base there is more likely to fall into the early adult years. Middle adult years. In the middle adult years, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to fund your retirement. That's the big thing you're doing out there. You are, of course, still probably paying on your mortgage. You still probably are at the very, hopefully at the end of the responsibilities that you have to your children as they are graduating from school and going out in their own life, getting their own, making their own money and making their own decisions. One of the interesting things that we look at here is when you're talking about trying to figure out how much money you need to retire with, you have to deal with life expectancies. How long are you going to live after you retire? And there's a chart in the book on page 217. I could reproduce it, but I'm just going to read a little bit of it. It discusses life expectancy. And I know we talked about actuarial tables a little bit earlier in the semester. And the actuarial tables are created by actuaries, and they are projections as to how long you're going to live. When you're born, you're expected to have a 76, 77-year lifespan. But as you age, your expectancy goes up. So there are a lot of children that die from childhood illnesses or childhood accidents, teenagers that die in crazy automobile accidents, things like that. If you live through those early years where there's a lot of danger in your life, you're probably going to live longer than the average life expectancy. Okay, so I'm looking at the chart, like I said, in the book, and this is the number of years that you will have left once you achieve the age of 65. Okay, so 65 is what everybody looks at as being the retirement age. And so if you, in 2005, if you were male, you would have an additional life expectancy of 16.4 years. So that's what, 781.4. So if you made it to 65, you're expected to make it to 81. And if you're a woman, if you're female, then you have an additional 19.7 years, which is going to be 88.7. No, 83.7. No, 84.7. 84.7. 2020, the expectation is 17.6 more years. So that life expectancy between 2005 and 2007 has gone up by 1.4 years, or 1.2 years for males, and basically 0.9 for females. So anyhow, when you're talking about retirement, you have to try and figure out how long you're going to live. Do you have a particular idea as to the life expectancy? Certain families have different different family histories as far as health goes. I don't particularly think I'm going to make it to 81 or 89 or anything like that. My father lived to 71 and my mother lived to 74. So I think, I guess it's not impossible that I make it into my 80s, but I'm not really anticipating that. But, planning for retirement, estimate the length of your life, future health status, forecast the amount and sources of pre-retirement and post-retirement income, predict the amount and type of retirement expenses, estimate your age of retirement, gauging the impact of inflation on your pre-retirement and post-retirement finances, anticipating the possibility of dependent children, dependent parents, or both. So those are the types of things that you take a look at when you're looking at planning for retirement. How do you fund your retirement? Well, you fund it hopefully with Social Security. You fund it with hopefully a pension of some sort that was provided by your employer. And then hopefully you have had the opportunity to put aside money for yourself, either in a retirement account or in just regular savings. The federal government does encourage people to save for their retirement. The federal government does this by giving you the ability to put money aside for retirement in what we refer to as pre-tax money. So, for example, if I have the ability to put part of my pay into my employer is putting a certain amount of money aside for me in my retirement, but I have the opportunity to put some of my own money into that retirement account also. It's a good thing to do. The whole thing there is it's going to be pre-tax money. So that means that the money that will come out of my pay and go into that retirement fund before taxes are calculated. So if I make $5,000 for the pay period and I put $1,000 into the retirement account, my income taxes are not calculated on the $5,000, which I actually earned, but I'm allowed to take that $1,000, put it into the retirement account, pre-tax. Now I end up calculating my income tax based on the reduced amount, not the $5,000 that I made, but the $4,000 after my my contribution into the retirement account. Another thing that is out there is something like a 401k. These are not necessarily employer sponsored, but you can do these individually. Generally, you set them up with a retirement, with an investments account, or you can set it up with banks. But basically, the IRS allows you to put money aside pre-tax. Now, once again, with the IRA, it's pre-tax money. Well, how can that be? Because Gomulchak, you have to have money to put into this account because it's not employer sponsored. How do you get it to be pre-tax? Well, you put the money in the IRA according to the IRS regulations, and then you're allowed to deduct it from your earnings before you pay your ultimate taxes at the end of the year. So yeah, you're paying for it with after-tax money, but then you get to deduct it. So that makes it pre-tax money doing it in that way. Another way that you can create funding for your retirement is something called an annuity. And an annuity is basically, the definition of an annuity is a stream of payments over a period of time. In a regular installments at regular periods. So specific, if I wanted to buy an annuity, I could get an annuity from an insurance company. If I wanted to put money aside to try and save for my retirement. So let's say that I was able to put aside $1,000 per year to put into an annuity that when I would retire, I'd be able to take that money and use it in my retirement. The beauty of an annuity is, although you pay for an annuity with after-tax money, it also has a tax benefit because the money that is earned in the annuity while it's sitting and just building up value, that appreciation in value is not taxed. So the money that you put in is after tax. When you take that money out, you don't pay tax on it a second time. However, the money that was allowed to grow in the annuity, tax-free, when you pull it out of the annuity, when you eventually retire or start collecting the annuity, that is taxed. So an annuity is a strange hybrid animal in that the money that you take out of an annuity in your retirement will be partially return of capital, thus non-taxable, and partial collection of income that was allowed to grow tax-free. So part tax-free, part taxable. And you'll have to have reporting from the annuity company to tell you what those amounts are. Okay, the later adult years, you're probably very close to the end of your earnings cycle. You probably don't have a ton of earning years left. We're not thinking about accumulating a tremendous amount of wealth at this point. You should have hopefully done that in the middle years. In your later adult years, you are starting to plan for the end, really. You're planning for your death and you're planning for your retirement. So planning for your death. It's one of the things that I tend to do in my law practice. I do a lot of estate planning, and in estate planning, generally, you're going to talk about a will, a power of attorney, and a living will. The book doesn't talk about the power of attorney or the living will, but I'll give you a quick synopsis. The will is a legal document that basically says, this is who gets my stuff when I die. Because when you die, you are the owner of the property, and you are the only person on the earth that has the legal right to administer or deal with your property. So that's why we need to raise an estate. So you write a will where you name somebody as your personal representative. We use the word executor, who who will handle your affairs after you die. Your will appoint that person, and it'll also say what you want to have happen to your property. The executor's job is to gather together your assets. Generally, they end up liquidating them, turning them into cash. They pay off your debts because dying doesn't get you out of paying your debts. They then pay your taxes. Dying doesn't get you out of paying your taxes. And then they distribute whatever's left over to the people that you want, your heirs, the people that you named in your will to receive your property. If you don't write a will, then you die what's called intestate. If you have a will, you die testate because you have a last will and testament. If you don't have a will, you die intestate. It's not a terrible thing, but it's not the best thing. If you die intestate, then you don't get to choose where your stuff goes after your death. No, it doesn't go to any really crazy, stupid places. It tends to go under the state intestacy laws according to relationship, blood relation. So if I were to die, my wife would be my heir, my children would be my heirs, my grandchildren would be my heirs, and the law would decide who gets what portion. The only bad thing is that it doesn't give me the choice. Then again, if I wanted to take the choice, I should have written the will. If I didn't write the will, then I'm going to be stuck with the state's version of what they think I want to happen with my stuff. Okay. Should have a will, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. Now, when you die, I said that your executor still has to pay your debts. So yeah, that's part of the estate process, the probate process, is to pay off the people that you owe money to. And then I said to pay your taxes because death doesn't get you out of paying taxes. And that's very true. And there's a whole bunch of taxes that we need to talk about. When you die, you will have what's called a final lifetime return, which means that, those tax returns you pay that you file every year and pay your taxes. Well, you still have to file one for the year in which you die. Well, it's going to be your executor's job to do that because obviously you're deceased. So you have to file your final lifetime income tax returns, pay them, or get your refunds, whatever is going to happen, but there is a requirement to do that. That's not the end. Now we talk about death taxes. Death taxes are, there's basically two death taxes. There's the federal estate return tax, which is the death tax, the federal death tax. And there is a state inheritance tax. Pennsylvania has an inheritance tax, which is in addition to the federal estate tax. Now, the federal government also has something called the federal gift tax. And the reason the gift tax exists is that the easiest way to not have to pay federal death tax is to not own anything when you die. So if you give everything away, you won't have anything, so there won't be any federal estate tax. However, the federal government doesn't like not collecting taxes, so they determined that if you give everything away improperly prior to your death to try and avoid paying death taxes, then you're just going to end up paying it as a gift tax. We don't have anywhere near enough time for me to go through all of the intricacies of the relationship of the estate tax and the gift tax. Understand that they are the flip sides of the same coin. It's the federal death tax that you either pay on death or you pay when you give away your stuff. There are ways to plan for that. There are ways to avoid these taxes. If you are in that situation, come see me. I'll charge you a lot of money and I'll save you a ton of tax. The Pennsylvania has an inheritance tax. Most states have an inheritance tax. Some states have an estate tax. Most states actually, the state's taxing structure is based on the federal tax structure. So if you file your federal estate tax, you just have already filed your federal state estate tax. Pennsylvania has an inheritance tax, which is not based on the federal tax at all. So therefore, it is an entirely separate and distinct tax away from the federal death tax. Pennsylvania's inheritance tax is well, before I talk about that, let's talk about the rate of tax. at the federal level. Now, I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to share this with you. Give me a second. Right. All right, so what you should be seeing is something that is entitled A Guide to the Federal Estate Tax for 2022 and 2023. Here's the tax rate. Now, the thing you have to understand is that these taxes that we're talking about now are not income taxes. It is not based on the income that you made during the year. These taxes are based on your wealth. What we are doing is we are taxing your property. Whatever you have spent your time accumulating during your life, when you die, we count up the value of what you own, your estate, your wealth, and then we tax your wealth. This is also called a generation transfer tax, or a general transfer tax, because we're transferring the wealth from one person to another through death. As you look, you see that the federal tax rate begins at 18% for $1 through $10,000 and runs to 40% if your estate is over $1 million. So the top rate is 40%. Understand what I'm saying. This is the tax based on your wealth. What you are worth can be taxed as high as 40%. All of that money that all that time you spent accumulating wealth can theoretically be taxed, and the government take 40% of your worth at the time of your death. Okay, now it's not that simple. The federal government, the structure that the federal government uses is that, well, we don't like taxing poor people. So they always give a certain amount at the bottom of every bracket that is zero. In the income tax, the below, I don't know, $16,000 or something like that in earnings, you pay no income tax. The death taxes have the same thing. It is, there's an exemption, excuse me, the state exemption is let's call it $13 million. So unless you have $13 million in wealth, you are not going to pay the federal death tax. However, if you have $13 million in wealth, this is where you're paying your tax at the 40% level. So what happens is all of these lower brackets down here, they get wiped out by the exclusion. And when the tax does take effect at $12,910,001, every dollar above that in your worth, your net wealth, is taxed at 40%. It is an abusive tax. I guess if you are rich enough, we shouldn't feel too sorry for you. But the reality of it is that if you do some planning, you can avoid paying a big chunk of that tax. Once again, we don't have time to talk about that. That is one of the things that I do in my law practice. And believe me, it is extraordinarily complicated. Now let's talk about Pennsylvania's inheritance tax. Pennsylvania's inheritance tax is a death tax, just like the federal death tax. But Pennsylvania taxes people differently. Pennsylvania says, well, we're not like the federal government. We don't give you a certain amount that you get tax-free. Pennsylvania taxes you from $1. Okay, so you don't get the first 12.92 million free. When you die, every dollar is taxed. Okay, now Pennsylvania's theory on this is we're going to tax every single dollar, but we're going to tax it at a lower rate. So you saw that the federal tax starts at $13 million, but it's at 40%. Pennsylvania's tax starts at $1, and the amount that you pay is based on the relationship between the heir and the decedent. So if you are the surviving spouse of the person who died, the effective tax rate is 0. And that's relatively new. That has happened during my career. Prior to the late 1990s, Pennsylvania did tax transfers between husbands and wives. We were the only state that did so. If you are a child, actually what we refer to as lineal heir, child, grandchild, parent, grandparent, up and down on the family tree, it's 4.5% is what you pay. If you are a sibling, brother, sister, you pay 12% on the inheritance tax. Anything further away than brother or sister, it is 15%. So it's not as abusive as the federal tax, but it's not a nuisance tax either. You know, we're talking about a tax on your entire wealth. So if you are going to be giving all of your assets to your children, which is going to be a 4.5% tax, and you have an estate worth $100,000, you're talking about $4,500 in death taxes. It is what it is. All right. So we worry about these things. Remember when we were talking about buying life insurance for need, and one of those needs was estate's stability or estate's preservation? You're going to be losing things if you die because of the fact you died. You're going to end up having to get buried. You're going to have to hire a lawyer. You're going to have to file your last income taxes. You're going to have to pay your debts. You're going to have to pay your death taxes. Can we plan for that? Is there a way that we can use life insurance to help plan for these end of life expenses? Yeah, absolutely, we can. So buy the life insurance. When you die, then what happens is you can go to somebody like me that can calculate out what the cost of you dying is going to be, and then you can buy life insurance. So if I determine that you're going to end up with $10,000 in death taxes and a funeral of $12,000 and other miscellaneous expenses of, say, $8,000. So I just told you that you're going to have $30,000 worth of expenses at the time of your death, and you want to have everything you own go to your children, then buy $30,000 worth of life insurance so that that money can be used to pay those end of life expenses. One of the other things that is interesting out there is taxability of life insurance. Is it taxable? Interesting question. What kind of tax are you asking about? Are we talking about income tax? Well, the answer there is income tax wise, no. Life insurance is not considered to be a taxable event for income tax purposes to whoever receives the money. Hey, it could be your estate, it could be your children, could be your wife, whoever. But when they receive the life insurance proceeds, it is not considered income. Therefore, it is not taxable. However, let's talk about death taxes now. Death taxes on the federal level. Life insurance is considered an asset of the decedent because you owned the policy at the time of your death. So therefore, the proceeds of life insurance policies would be considered part of your estate and would increase the amount of tax, as death tax, federal estate tax, that you would have to pay, unless we did some planning. Now, I'm going to throw one thing out here. Like I said, this whole area is extraordinarily complicated. If you want to sit down with me someday and just hear me talk about stuff that's extraordinarily interesting to me, but extraordinarily boring to you, come talk to me in my office hours someday, and I'll tell you all about it. But one of the things that we have is something called an irrevocable life insurance trust, ILIT. And what happens is if you are somebody who's going to end up with a federal estate tax problems, you don't want to buy life insurance and have it increase the size of your estate. So what you do is you create a new legal entity, which is called a life insurance trust. And the whole purpose of the trust is to own the policy of life. So what happens is you fund the trust with your money. You put your money into the trust, and then the trust uses your money to buy the life insurance policy. That way, when you die, you don't own the life insurance policy. The life insurance policy is owned by the trust, which is a separate legal entity, a separate taxable entity. And therefore, when we calculate out your death taxes, your federal estate tax, we don't include the value of that life insurance. What happens to the life insurance that's in the life insurance trust? Well, after you die, it collects the proceeds of the life insurance policy, and then it pays it to your heirs. And that way, it reimburses them for the amount of the estate that's lost by the taxes and by the attorney fees and by the blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we can get very complicated, and we can do a lot towards really making sure that the largest value of your estate will end up going to your heirs. But like I said, that's a pretty complicated process. We don't have a lot of time for that here. The next thing in this chapter that I want to talk about is how do you liquidate your retirement savings? Okay, so you've spent your entire working career putting money aside so that when you retire, you'll be able to have money to do all the things that you want in your retirement. That's great. But all that money is in those retirement accounts. How do you get it out? Okay, now there's the big boogeyman here is the tax agent. All right, because since the retirement of money is all tax sheltered, we have to worry about the IRS when we're doing any kind of a transaction with our retirement accounts. All right, so I have a pension from my employer that I'm allowed to start drawing out on because I've retired. That's fine. I start taking the money out if it's a defined benefit plan, so I'm getting a set amount per month for the rest of my life. That's great. When I get the payments, I have to include it in my income. That's fine. It's just going to be taxable income. Understand that. It wasn't taxed when that money was put aside for you. It needs to be taxed now. What about the money that you put into your 401k? Same thing. It's an employer-sponsored plan, but this is a bucket of money instead of a defined benefit plan. Well, I can start taking the money out as I want to use it. I can, I've got $500,000 in my retirement account, and I decide that I'm going to be able to live on $3,000 a month. So I start taking $3,000 a month out of my 401k plan. That's fine. The money that I take out is going to be considered income when it comes out to me. Just as long as you understand that you got a tax break when that was created on your behalf, you now have to pay income tax on it when it comes out to you now. What about your IRA? Okay. Oh yeah, that was the money that you put aside for yourself that was not sponsored by your employer. And, oh yeah, you can do that. We encourage you to do that. We've given you the tax break to do that. The government wants you to do that. Okay. Well, what about how do I get that money out? Same thing. You just start taking the money out as you want to use it. But as you take the money out, understand that it's going to be taxable. All of it will be considered income, and you'll have to pay income tax on it on your tax return. I did talk about the annuity earlier. So if you have an annuity that's paying back, this is one of those hybrid things. Part of the money, part of the payment you get will be return of principal, so it will not be taxable. Part of it will be considered the growth or the income that was created inside the annuity that will be taxable. So you have to have tax reporting given to you by the annuity company. So no problems. It's all pretty cut and dried. No complications there. Oh, wait a minute. We have a couple of other concepts to pay attention to. Now, the government wants to encourage you to save for your retirement, but they don't want you to have access to that money until you're retired. So it's like, okay, I've been working for 20 years and I'm 40 years old now, and I want to take that money out and buy a car. I've got a lot of money put aside. Can't I just have that money? Yeah, it's your money. But because of the fact that the government had you earmark that for your retirement, and they gave you a tax break because you had put that aside for your retirement, if you use it for something other than your retirement, they get angry. So if you take the money out prior to 59 and a half, okay, so if you are 59 years, 6 months old, you're allowed to start taking the money out of your retirement accounts. If you are prior to, younger than 59 years, 6 months old, then you are violating the purpose of the account, and the IRS will tax you. Oh, it's okay, Gamalchak. I know you told me I have to pay tax on the money that comes out. Yeah, you have to pay tax on the money that comes out, but then there's an additional 10% penalty because you took the money out prior to being the right age. Okay, so that's not a good thing. So understand, you do have access to that money, but there's a penalty to get that money. You shouldn't take it out and pay the penalty. That's just silly. Also, you are required to start taking the money out no later than age 70 and a half, I believe. So if you, let's say that you continue to work. I love my job. I'm not going to retire. So therefore, I don't have any need to take my money out of my retirement account. Let's just let it sit there and continue to grow. That's great. I'm going to work until I'm 75. I absolutely love my job. Well, you got a problem, because at 70 and a half, the IRS says you got to start taking money out of your account. We don't want that sitting in there tax exempt forever. We want to have you take it out so we can tax you on that. So at 70 and a half, you have something called the RMD, the required minimum distribution. And what that is it's a calculated number that is, if you take all of your sheltered money, your retirement money, and calculate out your life expectancy, you have to take out per year the amount that would be adequate to get rid of that money prior to your death. So if if you calculate out that you're going to live another 17 years, you have to take 1/17 out this year in order to make sure you have your required minimum distribution. What happens if you don't take out your required minimum distribution? Penalty. Okay, a 10% penalty on the amount that should have been taken out. So even if you didn't take it out, you're going to end up paying tax because the IRS said you should have taken it out. So understand, once again, the tax rules here are what seems to really drive what happens in retirement. All right. All right, business uses of life insurance. We talked about the possibility of buying life insurance for a key person. I've got that person that works for Gamalchak Widgets, who is the absolute best salesman in the world. And if he were to die, it would negatively affect my business because I'd have to find somebody, train somebody to be as good of a salesman as he is. So I could buy key person life insurance on him to benefit the company. So if he dies, there's going to be a downturn in business. We might not make the profits we're used to. Well, the life insurance could help us get over that hump until we replace him properly. Life insurance as a employee benefit. So yeah, we can offer life insurance to our employees. That's called group life insurance. It's generally going to be term insurance that is available while you're making the payments, no cash buildup and such as that. And it's going to be cheaper. Term insurance is always cheaper than whole life insurance. And because of the fact that you're doing it as a group, the insurance company will give you another discount. So when the employer pays for it, or if you pay for it, just buying it through the employer, you'll end up with a much better, cheaper cost to your insurance. So it's one of those nice things that have out there. Another type of life insurance that can be purchased for your employees is something called split dollar life insurance. This is defined as a method of paying for permanent life insurance coverage in which two parties, often an employer and an employee, each pay a portion of the annual premium, with one party paying an amount equal to the increase in cash value in a given year, and the other party, the employee, paying the remainder. So what this means is that if we decide that we are going to have split dollar life insurance for some of our employees, not necessarily all of them, whatever the increase in the cash surrender value is, the company will pay. The employee will pay whatever the remaining part of that is. And keeping in mind, as the cash surrender goes up, then the amounts that the cost of insurance goes down, because you start getting the dividends from the cash value. Okay. One of the things that happens is, after several years, the part of the insurance that the employee has to put in goes away. It no longer costs them any money to have this life insurance, and the employer will continue to pay the premiums based on the cash value going up and up and up. Well, the way that split dollar works is, when that employee dies, the company gets back all of the cash surrender value, which means they actually are reimbursed for all of the premiums that they paid over the years. And the employee ends up getting the remainder, or his beneficiaries end up getting the remainder of the policy, or the proceeds. And he got this insurance by only paying the premiums for a few years. So it's a great thing. However, if you quit, I'm going to cash in the policy and take my money back, and the life insurance goes away. So this is another one of those little tools that you can use to try and keep your employees at your company. Oh, if I leave now, I'm going to lose that $100,000 worth of life insurance. The employer is never out anything, because all they ever put in was the increase in the cash value. And once the employee leaves, they would just cash it out and get their money back. Business continuation is another purpose for a life insurance. Business continuation, and once again, keep in mind that the chapter that we're in is the professional financial planner. Business continuation is one of those really strange things. How do you continue a business? When we talk about continuing a business, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about trying to make sure that we have the ability to pass the company on to the next generation. Okay. Usually what we're talking about are family-owned business or closely owned businesses between friends and families and things like that. So if I have so Gamalchek Widgets I own, and ultimately when I die, I want it to be able to go to my children. That's one business continuation issue. What if it's not that I'm worried about it going to my children? What if it's that I have another partner that's an equal owner with me? There's me and there's Bob Johnson. And what happens when one of us dies? Well, what happens is, let's say Bob Johnson dies. He owns half of the company. Now, who then will own his stock in my company? Well, it will be his heirs. And for simplicity's sake, let's say that everything goes to his wife. I liked being in business with Bob Johnson because he knew the widget business, and he was useful in the company. He had a job that he did, and he did it well. And part of the success of the company was because of him. The other part of the success was because of me. Now that he's gone, I can probably continue on the business, but do I want to be in business with his wife? The answer is probably not, unless she has those same skills that he had. Now that he's gone, his ownership in the company is a burden to me, because now I have to give half of my profits to this woman who doesn't have any of the skills and doesn't add anything to the running of the business. So I don't want to be in business with her. I want her to sell me for that half of the company so that I'll be the sole owner of the company. Okay, that's fine. Do it. Well, I don't have the money. Well, then I'm not selling to you. I might sell to somebody else even. Oh, that's even worse. Okay, how about we fund a buy-sell agreement between me and Bob Johnson with life insurance? We determine what the value of the company is. Let's say we both figure that the company is worth $1 million. So his share would be worth 500,000. My share would be worth 500,000. So I would buy a $500,000 life insurance policy on Bob's life, and he would buy a $500,000 policy on my life. When he dies, I get the $500,000 from the life insurance policy. And because there's a legal contract between he and I, the buy-sell agreement, his estate is required to sell the shares of stock to me so that I am guaranteed to own 100% of the company. I have to pay for that stock, and we've determined that the value of that stock is $500,000. I just got the $500,000 check from the insurance company. I'll now give that to his estate, which will go to his wife. She'll end up getting the benefits of his being an owner in the company, and I won't have to take her on as another owner. I now own the company 100%. I have to find somebody to do what he used to do, but I used life insurance and a contract, the buy-sell agreement, to end up with 100% ownership in the company when he died, without it being a difficult financial transaction. All I've been doing is paying the premiums on the life insurance policy for whatever number of years. Now I have the proceeds, and boom, I now own the company. That's a good thing. What if we had a lot of different owners? What if we had like 8 owners in the company? Buy-sell plans can be arranged in one of 2 ways. Each partner or shareholder can purchase life insurance on every other partner, shareholder. This is called a cross-purchase plan. If there were 8 partners involved in a cross-purchase plan, each partner would have to purchase 7 policies on the other 8 owners. And a total of 56 policies would therefore need to be purchased. That's a very complicated thing. What if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to? Then this whole plan falls apart. The other idea here is we can have what's called an entity plan, where it could be the business that buys the life insurance. Yes, businesses can own life insurance policies. So instead of each of us buying life insurance policies on the other 7 owners, then what would happen is we would have the company buy a life insurance policy on each of the owners. So 7 policies instead of 56. The company would then we would have a purchase agreement between the owners and the company that when an owner dies, his estate is required to sell the shares of stock in the company back to the company. And the company, of course, would have the money from collecting the proceeds of the insurance policy on that person's life. So then what would happen is that owner would get paid off, his estate would be made whole, his heirs would end up inheriting the value of the company. His shares of stock would then be retired, and instead of there being 8 owners, there would now be 7 owners. We've got larger ownership pieces of the company. It didn't cost us anything because we used life insurance to fund it. So if you end up with a lot of owners, an entity plan is probably a lot more efficient. If it's just a couple of you, then you can probably get away with the cross-purchase plan. Those are pretty nice also.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So in theory, I know with like PPOs and like health insurance, you could buy different plans and run different plans through pay and how much you're going to give as an employer to health insurance. Would the same work with term life insurance? You could go through different plans.
You can get into different plans, and you can choose the amounts that you want to have. I guess mostly it would come down to the amount of the insurance that you were willing to offer. If you're offering it as a fringe benefit to your employees, is that what you're saying, Jake?
Yeah, kind of, because like I know with health insurance, you can run different plans because depending on age, a lot of people, as they get older, kind of like defeats the fair share, and
Yeah,
kind of like makes people pay more for the younger because they're compensating for the older people.
yeah,
Would the
yeah.
same thing kind of happen?
The interesting thing about the life insurance aspect of this is that you will end up with different premiums based on the individual that's involved. And it'll probably be driven by age. So if you have like 50 employees and 40 of them are, in their 20s, and then 10 of them are in their 50s, you're going to pay more for the 10 that are in their 50s. Generally, that type of insurance is going to be a fringe benefit that you don't make the employee pay for. However, if you say, I'm making this available to you, and if you want it, you have to pay for it, then what will happen is the insurance company will give you a rate, and then you just pass that rate on to your employee. Make sense?
Yeah, because like I know what we do is we offer two different things. So like we cover only so much of it, da da da, and so much of it comes out of the pay,
Mhm.
up to 40 hours. So I know for like so basically health insurance would be like a group rate, and health and life insurance is based on the individual.
Yeah, but you are getting a group rate, but it's not all going to necessarily be the same number. You're getting a discount because you're doing it as a group, put it that way.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now the next thing in the chapter starts talking about taxation of life insurance. I've already talked about that, except there are some complications to the taxation. As I said, when you collect life insurance as a beneficiary, then what's going to happen is you don't pay income tax on it. That's the general rule, but that's not the ultimate rule. There's a couple of ways you can end up paying income tax. One is, what you'll find if you start dealing with the insurance companies, they all really consider themselves to be financial institutions, not just insurance companies. They tend to look at themselves as financial planners and financial advisors and things like that. They want to hold your money. Life insurance is just one of the things that they do. So with all of the estates that I work with right now, what happens is I always end up getting into a fight with the insurance company to get the money. Not that they won't pay it, they will, but they don't want to give you the money. They want to say, oh, okay, we've recognized the death and we recognize that we have to pay out $100,000 death claim. But here at Prudential, we want to make sure that your financial future is secure and safe. So we're not going to give you that $100,000 outright. What we're going to do is we're going to open up an investment account for you in the amount of $100,000. And then we want you to tell us how to invest this money. Well, you're entitled to that $100,000. You just have to jump through some hoops to get them to liquidate that stupid account that they just opened up for you. But let's say that you decide, oh, okay, yeah, I don't know what to do with that money right now. I'll let them hold on to it and invest it for me. So you get $100,000 back as proceeds of the life insurance policy, and then you leave it with Prudential for a year, and it earns you $1,000 worth of interest or something like that. You have to pay tax on that interest. The $100,000, no, but income created by the insurance proceeds, yeah, that's taxable. So you'd end up having to pay for that. Other ways that you can end up paying income tax is if you buy a life insurance policy. Well, what are you talking about? You can sell your insurance policy. If you're the owner, you can sell it. See, the insurance company doesn't care who owns the policy, and they don't care who the beneficiary is. All they know is that when they created the policy, they set it up based on insuring a particular life. So if the life insurance policy is insuring my life and I own the policy, but I don't want to own it anymore, I can sell the policy. Okay. And I've seen a lot of commercials or heard a lot of commercials on the radio lately, and I see them on TV. where there's companies out there that say, well, have you decided that you no longer need your life insurance? Don't let it lapse. Sell us your policy instead, and they'll buy the policy from you, because eventually you are going to die, and they'll pay you, and they'll figure out, using all the proper financial techniques to figure out what the risk is, how much they should pay you in order to eventually get the proceeds upon your death. So when you buy a life insurance policy and then later on collect the proceeds on it, that was not technically life insurance anymore. That became some sort of a weird investment. And the IRS looks at that as an investment. So if it's $100,000 a policy and I paid you $80,000 for it, when you die some number of years in the future, I'm going to collect the $100,000. Well, the IRS makes me claim that $20,000 difference because I have $80,000 invested in the policy, but I got 100 back. Because I bought the policy in that way, I have to pay the difference between the proceeds, pay tax on the difference between the proceeds and the cost of buying the policy. This falls under living benefits, dividend savings, and accelerated death benefits in the chapter. We're really at the end of this chapter, I believe. 3 ways to receive life or cash from your life insurance policy while you are alive. If the policy is participating, the contract entitles the owner to a share of profits. Insurers call this dividends. So you will end up getting dividends. Most people just allow the dividends to accrue inside the insurance policy, which increases the cash surrender value. But you do have the opportunity to collect the dividends, where the insurance company would quarterly or annually send you a check for the dividends earned on your policy. If a life insurance policy has a cash surrender value, they have referred to a savings value in the chapter, you can withdraw that. You can borrow against it. You can borrow the cash surrender value, or you could tell them, hey, I'm done with this. I want to surrender the policy and I want to withdraw all the money that's due me. If the insured is terminally ill, many insurance companies will give the owner the right to receive a lump sum settlement based on the death benefit. It's not going to be the full amount, it'll be some discounted amounts. But if you can show the insurance company that you are terminal and expected to die within a certain period of time, a certain number of weeks, months, whatever, then they will give you the death benefit early. Under the theory, I guess, that you want to have the opportunity to do something. All right. That's kind of the end of that chapter. Anybody have any questions about the professional financial planner? As you can see, insurance policies, insurance products can play a big part in financial planning. You use it to really try to fund where you believe there's going to be a loss in the future. So talking about risk management, I've said in many of the classes that I teach that the biggest asset in your life that you're ever going to have is your ability to earn money. If you die, you no longer have that ability to earn money. Life insurance is one of the ways to create a way of funding that. All right, so if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to move to chapter 12 right now. The personal auto policy. We're going to refer to this as the PAP, the PAP, the personal auto policy. All right, so in this chapter, we want to discuss the legal system where we sue people for negligence. So this is the liability system in the courts. We want to talk about the various parts of the personal auto policy. What does it cover? We want to talk about, let's see, I'm just looking over the, you should be able to. Describe the coverage provided under the PAP, describe the coverage provided under medical, uninsured motorists, understand the difference between collision and loss other than collision, how do insurers settle things, and pricing. All right, so the first thing that we want to talk about in the personal auto policy is the fact that there are 4 parts to the personal auto policy. Parts A, B, C, and D. Part A is liability coverage. Part B is medical payments coverage. Part C is uninsured motorist coverage. And Part D is coverage for damage to your automobile. And we refer to that as collision or not collision. So moving right along, let's talk about if you're reading along in the book, they give you a fact situation where we have an insured who is in an accident. Read a book. A librarian uses their car to commute to work. At the intersection of Dickens and Hugo Way, her car is struck broadside by another car driven by Rex cars. Her car is totaled. The damage equals $25,000. She has broken her neck. Damages of $90,000 in medical expenses, $15,000 loss of income. Rex's car is damaged to the tune of $15,000. Skull is cracked. Expects to lose more than $15,000 of income. Okay, so we have 2 drivers, 2 vehicles, and 2 different sets of damages that came from the vehicle. Rita decides that she's going to sue Rex and sues him for $230,000 in damages. So she had $130,000 in damages that we described above, and she's adding on $100,000 for pain and suffering. We end up in court. Now, in court, we're talking negligence here, right? So just going through the parts of negligence, we have to prove that you had a duty to act in a certain way, that you breached that duty, you didn't act properly, that there was causation, that your failure to maintain your duty caused. The 4th element is injury or damages. Okay, so in this situation, we are going to have an at-fault thing occur. We're going to have to determine who is responsible for the damages that occurred here. Okay, so under negligence, Rita is suing Rex, and Rex, let's say that the jury finds that Rex is 100% responsible, that he had gone through a stop sign or something like that, and he is 100% responsible for the accident, failure of duty, caused the accident, caused her damages, and they award the full $230,000 to Rita. Okay, how does that get paid? We have to look at the insurance policy to see what is going to be covered. All right, the insurance policy is going to have a structure that's going to have multiple different things. In your book, there's a little chart on page 178. You're going to have the declarations page or the deck page. We talked about that already. The actual agreement, we're going to have definitions, and then we're going to have the description of Part A, liability, Part B, medical, Part C, uninsured, Part D, damage to your vehicle. Part E is going to describe what your duties are after the accident, and Part F is going to be general provisions, which we lawyers would like to refer to as boilerplate language. In the book, they show a deck page for an insured called David Cather. Would have been nice if they would have done that for Rex, but anyhow. All right, so Part A, liability coverage. Liability is a coverage, an insurance coverage for where the insurance company is going to indemnify you. They will pay the cost of the damages that you caused by your actions. Okay, so when I say your actions, if we go back to that accident, we had Rex who went through the stop sign and created the accident and damaged Rita. Okay, now Rita is suing Rex, and so this is going to fall under the liability portion of his insurance. It's not medical, it's not damage to his car, and it's not I can't remember what was D. Go back a page. Oh, uninsured motorist was C, and then D was coverage for damage to your auto. Okay, so this definitely falls under liability. Give me a second. My book is jumping too many pages at a time. Okay, so one of the things that happens under liability is that we end up with limits. Nobody has unlimited liability coverage. If you were trying to buy that, that would be so extraordinarily expensive that if you could afford it, you probably could afford to self-insure. So what happens on the liability side is you tend to pick your limits. This is the amount that I am willing to pay for, okay? And generally, you're going to have the limits on the liability portion of a personal auto policy being shown as 3 separate numbers. They refer to it as the split limits, okay? And in the book, they use, let's see, 100, 300, and 50. So you pay a maximum of $100,000 to any one injured person. So if somebody were injured in excess of $100,000, that one person, your liability coverage would only go to $100,000. If you injured multiple people in the accident, you would not be able to go over 100,000 for any particular person, nor would you be able to go over $300,000 for the entire accident. Okay, so 100,000 per individual, any one individual, 300,000 for any one accident, and then the 50 that they have at the end is for $50,000 of property damage. Okay, so if we were to look at that case earlier that they gave us, you know, Rita was hit by Rex, and Rita had $230,000 worth of damage to her. 25 of that was to her car. That means basically 205 was damage to her. If your life insurance was, excuse me, your liability insurance was 100, 300, 50, one person maximum is $100,000. Your insurance would only pay $100,000 to Rita. Okay. Now, I think that in the book they assumed that Rex had higher insurance, but understand there is a chance that you're not going to have enough insurance to pay for the damage that you create. You know, getting into if you injure somebody and cause them, you know, a lot of injury, the numbers could get very big very fast. All right, so understand you may get to your limits, and we're going to talk about overshooting your limits. So let's talk about it right now. This is one of those things that I was talking about a couple of classes ago, where I said, you know, that the older you get, you start accumulating assets and you start having something to lose. Okay, so when you're first starting out in your life, what do you really own? You've got your job, which is your ability to earn. You may have a car, but if you've got a car, then maybe all you have is, a debt. You probably owe a lot of money on that car anyhow. So if I were to sue you, what could I take away from you? You don't own anything. So lower liability limits probably makes sense to you because you have to have it because it's required by state law that you have at least liability coverage on your personal auto policy. But once we get beyond that, what do you have to protect? Okay, so you may not worry about that. You may want to go with the lower limits. Now, the lower that your limits are, the less money that you're going to spend. Your insurance is going to be cheaper if you have lower limits. That's not always a good thing because, as we see, if this is a Rita situation here, that Rita would not end up being fully compensated for her injuries that you caused. If you're older and you've started acquiring assets and you've got something to lose, you don't want to have lower limits. You want to have higher limits on your insurance because if you do cause somebody injury, you want to make sure that it doesn't go over your limits. You want to make sure that your insurance is going to pay for everything. Because see, if I had the lower limits on my liability coverage and the insurance didn't pay for all of Rita's damage, so like I said, 100,000, she had 205, so it'd be $105,000 that's not covered by insurance. She would sue me for that 105, and since I have assets to lose, she would take away my assets and I would lose my house type thing. That's the situation we're talking about. So if you've got something to lose, you should have the higher limits. All right. What is an adequate limit? An adequate limit is one large enough to cover any damage you may cause with an auto. If one is responsible for killing a doctor earning $4 million a year, forcing a school bus carrying 30 children off the road, all of whom are injured, or causing a truck loaded with 100 flat screen televisions to overturn, perhaps doing all this in one single negligent act, you could be faced with $10 million or more in claims. It's easy to come up with situations where you can come up with huge, large amounts of liability. All right, so consider that. When we get to uninsured and underinsured, we'll talk about it specifically. Who is going to be the insured under your policy? So who is it? You have a policy. Who's going to be insured if they drive your vehicle? First off, you have to understand that the insurance doesn't cover you. It insures your vehicle. Okay, so the first category and the most common category is the named insurer. Me and my wife are the named insurers on my policy. If I had children still living at home, they would be resident family members, so they would be covered. Okay, and any person who is using the vehicle with my permission. All right, so as long as I have the insurance on the vehicle, anybody that I allow to use my vehicle will be covered by my insurance. Okay, now it gets kind of interesting because you can have primary coverage and excess coverage here. What happens if you loan your car to somebody who has their own insurance? Does that mean that their insurance is covering your car? No, not originally. But what would happen is if they got into an accident with your car, your coverage would pay the damages. So your coverage would be the primary coverage. If the damage was so high that it was larger than your limits, then what would happen is the policy that covered the driver would then come in as excess coverage. So if they needed to go into his policy secondarily, then they could. So primary coverage and then secondary or excess coverage. Okay. I think we're going to call it a day right here. Because I only have a few minutes left and I do need to get myself set up for another Zoom meeting. I have a faculty meeting in a couple of minutes. Let me just go back on my computer screen here to the Zoom page. You should have seen that I did correct your second exam for the course, and I posted it on Moodle. Everybody did, I thought, relatively well. Are there any questions on anything we covered today? Any questions that you might have? If not, I'll call it a day here, and hopefully that I'll be in school on Thursday so we can pick this up again face to face. Joe, I didn't get a chance to correct your exam. I'll have that done hopefully before class on Thursday to return that to you. Beyond that, that's all I got. See you guys on Thursday.
See you later.
See ya.